Hi, I'm Dr. Aaron Anderson. I teach presentation skills for Fortune 500 companies all over the world. Today we're going to talk about how to organize your presentation. Have you ever sat through a presentation and at the end of it you weren't exactly sure what you were supposed to do with that information? Or have you ever sat through a presentation and you weren't entirely sure why you should care? It's because those presentations weren't well organized. So today we're going to go over a few simple tips that will help you organize any presentation at any time. First thing you need to do is recognize that the presentation isn't about your information or about you. It's about what your information means for your audience. In other words, the first thing you have to do is figure out what your information means to your audience and why they should care. Once you've organized it in that way, with them in mind, then you can begin putting your presentation together. The second thing you need to do is have a hook. In the theater or in presentations, what we call a hook is something that grabs your audience's attention right off the bat, some reason they should care. So for instance, today I use the word you. Have you ever done this? Have you ever wondered this? And I made you feel a little bit bad about presentations. The very first thing you want to do is have something that grabs your audience's attention. This is called a hook. That's the first thing you should do to organize it. Figure out what it is you can do that will make your audience listen. The next thing you want to do is you want to chunk your information into simple units, and you want to have a limited amount of information. You don't want to lay out lots and lots and lots of details. You want to have at most 3 to 5 different chunks of information you present, and there's a reason for this. When you're giving a presentation, you're doing so, the audience is listening orally. What that means is they're processing it through their ears. And in order for them to follow it, they actually have to have a mental map in their mind of how this goes with that. And let me give you a little example. So if I say, I know something about Becky, that's one piece of information. If I say, I know that Becky knows something about me, that's 2 pieces of information. If I say, I know that Becky knows about the camera guy, that's 3 pieces of information. I know that she knows that he knows about him. That's 4 pieces of information. It's kind of confusing. If I go with 5, I know that she knows that he knows about that person and about that person over there. You've already lost me. This is the most information that you can hold in your mind at one time. So when you're giving a presentation, you want to say, here's 1 chunk of information, here's a 2nd chunk, here's a 3rd chunk, maybe a 4th chunk, and at the outside a 5th chunk. If you have to give more information than that, consider doing it in a format other than a presentation. The 4th thing you want to do is tell a story or use a prop or an image. Some of the best presentations I've ever seen told stories and props. The very best presentation I ever saw used a prop to get the information across. It was an IT manager for a large Fortune 500 company, and they needed to change the digital routers in the company. And instead of laying out all the facts and figures, what he did is he came out and he said, you all need these routers to work. You do so many transactions through them daily, and they bring in this much money for the company, but they need to work well. Let me show you something. And he went and he grabbed in a box and he pulled out just this square box that was one of the digital routers, and there was a little bit of smoke coming out of it. And he said, and they're not supposed to smoke. He laid it on the table. Any questions? Everybody was like, we will totally change that. That doesn't look good. He didn't lay out information. What he did was he told a quick story and he had that physical prop. That was enough to get the information across. Stories, props, and images are the best way to get information across. If you can use those rather than have a system of bullet points, your presentations are going to be much, much better. The last thing you want to do is make sure to end strong. What a lot of people do when they present is they just stop. They say, that's all I've got. Instead of doing that, what you want to do is have a summary or a closing statement or an action item at the end. So for instance, today we'll have a quick summary. We went over 5 steps for giving a good presentation. We said, make sure it's about them, have a hook, chunk it into small pieces of information, no more than 3 to 5, tell a story or use a prop, and finally end strong. By saying that summary, it's reinforced this information in your mind. In addition to this video, you should also have a document that'll lay out steps about how to put your presentation together. And you can get in touch with your chapter founder who can give you some additional information. Let's talk about how to prepare for your presentation or your talk. Have you ever watched somebody give a presentation or they give a talk and they forget what to say halfway through? Or have you ever felt so nervous that you were afraid you were going to forget what to say? Or have you ever seen somebody get so nervous that they just sort of melted down in the middle of it? The reason that happened is that they hadn't prepared enough. So today we're going to cover 5 quick tips that'll get you ready to get ready. The first thing you're going to want to do is craft your presentation well in advance of your talk. What you want to do is make sure that you have enough time to rehearse. When people give regular presentations that include slides, the general rule of thumb is to give a third of your time designing your presentation, a third of your time actually putting together the slides, and a third of your time rehearsing. Now, even if you don't have slides, you want to make sure that you have plenty of time to rehearse your presentation. So the first tip is to give yourself enough time to rehearse, even if it's just one day. Second thing, you want to say it out loud. When you're practicing, make sure you actually say it with your lips, your teeth, and your tongue. The reason is that giving a talk is a physical activity. You are actually using your body, using your voice. If you only practice it by looking and reading in your mind, you're not training your body to be able to do it. Think about your presentation as muscle memory. You're giving a talk in a way that uses your muscles. This is especially important if your talk has any tongue twisters in it or things you want to make sure that you say correctly. But the first thing you want to do is give yourself enough time for the second thing, which is to say it out loud. The third thing is related to that, which is you want to say it on your feet. If you're going to be giving a presentation while standing, you need to rehearse it while standing. What happens is when your body is in an unfamiliar situation, it releases the fight or flight chemicals. And actually, the fight or flight part of your body is actually freeze, fight or flight. So for a moment, if you get a little stressed, you freeze and your brain comes out of your ear and runs away. And you don't want that to happen. What you want to do is get your body used to standing, used to speaking. The more used your body is to it, the less likely you are to have that momentary freeze. So say it out loud and say it on your feet. And if possible, say it wearing the type of clothing that you're going to be wearing during that day. If you're going to be wearing high heels, practice it in high heels. If you're going to be wearing a tie, practice it in a tie. Anything that convinces your body that what you're doing is normal will help you with your presentation. The next thing you want to do is say it lots of different ways. So you're not giving a speech. All the words don't have to be the right way. What you're doing is you're giving a presentation or conveying information. So you want to make sure that you understand that information clearly. So you want to paraphrase. Say, this is my first point. Here's that same idea said a different way, on a different way, and a different way. And then my last point is this, and they say that a different way. And then you can go back and you can do your talk in different orders. If anyone here has ever played a musical instrument, think about it that way. You don't practice a musical piece from the beginning to the end, and then if you screw up, you go back to the beginning. You practice one section until you have it right, and then you practice another section until you have it right, and then you practice the next section. Then you can go back. The same thing is true for your presentation. Say it one way, say it another way, say it a third way. Get yourself used to presenting the ideas rather than the words. Lastly, maybe most important, on the day you give your presentation, the day that you're going to do it, wake up that morning, look over your information one more time to make sure that you know what's going on, and then forget it. Relax. Do anything other than concentrate on that presentation. The last thing you want to do is keep obsessing over this, to keep thinking about it. Give your mind time to relax. If you've given yourself enough time to rehearse the day before, you already know this. So what you want to do is just relax. Do something else, maybe do a little light exercise, have a light breakfast, but just relax. And then, just before you get up to speak, look at your outline one more time. First point, second point, third point, got it. Then stand up, make a connection with your audience, and then just have a conversation with them. So, one more time. 1, give yourself lots of time so that you can rehearse. 2, when you rehearse, make sure you say it out loud. 3, say it on your feet so that your body gets used to saying it. 4, say it lots of different ways so that your body is used to conveying information rather than giving words in a certain order. And lastly, on the day you present, relax. Do something else. This isn't rocket science. You're having a conversation with a group of people and you're giving them a gift of your information. Let's talk about how to actually give your talk. Have you ever seen anyone give a presentation and they look down and they sort of maybe they shuffle back and forth, or maybe they looked around, or maybe they had a pen in their hands and they clicked it lots of times, or maybe they shuffled, or maybe they paced wildly back and forth? These are actually very common habits that people have. Now, nobody plans to do those things. Nobody thinks, I know what will be the best way to give a presentation is to look at my feet and shuffle around. What's happened is they haven't actually given any thought to the physical act of standing up and presenting. And in the absence of a plan, what has happened is bad habits have crept in. So let's talk about 5 tips that will make you ready to be present physically when you give your presentation. Number 1, think of your face first. When people look at you, the very first thing they see is your face. When you come out, get to where you're going to present, plant yourself, breathe out ever so slightly, and smile. Everyone smiles when they give a gift. As a result, we all associate smiles with something meaningful in some way, shape, or form. Unless you are giving very dire information, failure to smile can look like you don't care, can look like the information isn't important. So what you want to do, look at your audience, breathe out ever so slightly, and smile. Now next, think about your eyes, making eye contact. If you're giving a large presentation to a large room, talking to everybody, you can't talk to everyone at once. Think about the way you talk to individuals. What you want to do is you want to make eye contact with one person in the audience, and you want to give them 1 or 2 points. Then you want to move to another point of the audience, make eye contact with an individual, and give them 2 or 3 points. Now, over the course of your presentation, you want to talk to people on the left, you want to talk to people on the right, you want to talk to people in front of you, and you want to talk to people behind you. Now, for beginning presenters, the best thing to do is to focus on people at the back of the room, because what that will do is it will lift your face and make sure that your voice comes out. Look towards the back, but also make individual contact with people around the room. So number 1, face first. Make eye contact, smile slightly, and talk to individuals. Second thing, pay attention to your feet. Where do your feet go? You can often tell where somebody is thinking about or what somebody wants to do based on where their feet point. If they're pointing away from you, you think, oh, they're trying to get away. Some people will do this, some people will rock, some people will move around slightly. This is because their feet aren't in a position that will help them. The best place to give a presentation is with your feet about shoulder width apart, with your weight over your feet, ever so slightly forward. This is a formal stance. You want to keep your knees slightly bent so that you don't lose your blood flow. But this is a formal presentation. My feet is equally weighted on both feet. I can, for an informal presentation, put my weight on one foot, but what I want to avoid doing is rocking with this foot. I can give a formal presentation, I can give an informal presentation. What I want to avoid doing is rocking rhythmically back and forth between these things. Just think about where you put your feet. Now, the other thing is, some people get so nervous when they're giving a presentation that they try to make themselves as small as possible. So they'll cross their feet and stand like this. Or sometimes they'll want to hide behind something, so they'll stand as far back from the audience as they can, but keep one foot up. And sometimes they also add to that kind of a little rocking of their foot. And if you add all of them together, you get something that sort of looks like this as people are talking. And they're shuffling back and forth. What they haven't done is given any thought to simply standing their ground and making sure they talk to their audience. So first, pay attention to your face. Second, pay attention to your feet. Make sure that they're pointed in the direction you want them to be pointed. The next, you want to think about your torso. How open or closed is your torso? Now, you've probably heard you're not supposed to cross your arms when you're giving a presentation, and that may or may not be true. You can probably get away with it, but what it does is it closes off part of your body. But I can do that same closing by rolling in my shoulders or by slumping or trying to make myself smaller. What this is doing is it's closing off, it's hiding the vulnerable bits of my body. Better for a presentation to give yourself more expression is to let your shoulders open, to let them come back, to let your body be present. This open posture for your torso is a much better way to be available to your audience and to make that connection. Next, what do you do with your hands? Now, this is one of my very favorite presentation questions. People ask me all the time, what do I do with my hands? Which is a hysterical question because you've never been talking to another human being and in the middle of that conversation gone, wow, look at my hands. They're so far away from my body. You've never had this conversation. But when you stand up and talk in front of people, you begin to feel a little unnatural. And because of that, you notice that your hands are very far away. And you know that they have something to do with your expressiveness. So you think, I have to do something with them. And once you begin thinking about it, your movements often become inauthentic. So the simplest thing to do is, one, keep your hands attached to your arms. That's the number one thing. Number two, gesture like you normally do. Some people talk with their hands a lot. Go ahead and talk with your hands a lot. Some people don't talk with their hands a lot. Don't try to become a hand talker if you're not a hand talker. But no one talks with their hands just dead at their side either. There's some middle ground here. What you want to do, as a general rule, is just keep your hands more or less in front of your body so that they can be available. Some people will advocate that you hold them behind your back like in a military posture, but what this does is it locks them in a position. The same thing is true if you put them in your pockets. There's nothing wrong with sticking your hands in your pockets, but it locks them in one position. You don't want them to be locked into one position. You want them to be in a place where they can move. Now, one of the best rules of thumb is to think about your presentation as existing in space around you. So some ideas exist on your left, some ideas exist on your right, some of them are behind you, some of them are in you, and some of them are for your audience. Don't gesture in this way, on the one hand, on the other hand, but you want to think about those ideas as existing one place or another, internal or external. And what that will do is it will let your hands have a place to go. Minor gestures, they're called micro gestures, so it's not a gesture so much as it is an inclination in space. So don't think about gestures, but do think about letting your hands have free rein to do with what they will. The last thing you want to think about is movement. Now, what presenters who are not prepared will do is they will rock or maybe they will pace in order to have some energy. They feel all this energy, and so they have to do something, and they just pace, sort of randomly back and forth. You don't want to pace, but you do want to allow yourself the freedom to move. Right now, I'm on camera, and I'm trying to maintain a certain distance from the lens. But if there's an audience in front of me, and there's somebody over here, as I make eye contact with them, I may move to this side of the room to be able to talk to that person. Or if I have a different point, I may see somebody else over there, and I may move to them in order to make that connection. Think of movement as transporting your body in space, and do it deliberately. If you do it in a random way, it will come across as pacing. What you want to do for the most part is think, this is where I want to be for this part of my talk, this is where I want to be for the next part of my talk, and here's where I want to end my talk. So again, 5 tips that'll help you be alive in your body. Face first. Smile, make eye contact with individuals. Second, think about your feet. Where are your feet pointing and where are you going to stand? Symmetrically, asymmetrically. 3, torso. Are you going to be closed or open? I'm going to recommend open is probably a little bit better. 4, what do you do with your hands? Keep them attached to your arms, number 1, and put your talk in space so that it lives outside of your body. Lastly, think about your movement as transportation of your body. Go from one side of the audience to the other side of the audience, close the distance and enlarge the distance, depending on what you want your audience to feel. You do those things, you're going to be fine.